take you to Cape Town now. Housing lacks continue to be a concern in many parts of the country.
Another concern for some people in the city is the threat of eviction, later forcing them into temporary housing.
The city of Cape Town, well, they're taking a hard line against illegal land invasions.
Chaos ensued in the Cape Town city centre on Friday morning.
The city, which has a historical housing backlog of hundreds of thousands, has often been criticised by housing activists for not releasing land through housing and social housing, questions of housing living in the city.
A group of residents are back in Cape Town saying that activists eliminate eviction.
It's simple as you can see that the city has got different cities within one city. Inequality is still rife in Cape Town. Khayelitsha was formed in 1983 because of those Group Areas Act and also the apartheid special plannings. Those people were forced to go far away from town so that they cannot be closer to job opportunities and other relevant things that are taking place within the city itself. So it was an element of sidelining the disadvantaged, and in particular the blacks.
PLUS is a research institute which is based at the University of the Western Cape. We look at the political economy of land, where we look at issues around land reform, issues of access to land, issues of tenure security. When we talk about special apartheid, this is segregation of people, where you segregate them according to their race, ethnicity, and their socio-economic background. Special apartheid exists in almost all cities in South Africa. But I think Cape Town has been used as a prime example of special apartheid because of its history. You must remember, this is where colonialism started. And this is where the colonial segregation still persists. And also, it's an issue of its geography. You know that there is physical segregation because of the mountains and also the coastline that defines who lives where. What also puts it in the spotlight is what has happened post-apartheid, where there seems to be some resistance from government policy, including urban planning, in terms of fixing special apartheid and making sure that the city is inclusive enough. So that's then put Cape Town in the spotlight as the city which is more divided along racial lines and where special justice has not happened.
KDF, it's Khayelitsha Development Forum that was established by the people of Khayelitsha to advocate and lobby for the development of Khayelitsha. In those years, the community of Khayelitsha was just above 200,000 population. As we are sitting now, there are mixed arguments that we are over 1.5 million population in Khayelitsha. The first people to occupy the area were the people that in co-houses and later on the people in shacks. In many instances, I have found out that not all of those people that are occupying those shacks are in need of houses. Some are in need of money. They call it shack farming. he cannot live in 4 shacks in Khayelitsha. He is living in 1 shack. But the other 3 shacks, he is renting out. In many cases, the political parties are playing a vital role in encouraging people to establish these informal settlements. We've seen it in recent years where some other political parties were in the forefront of making sure that these settlements are established, hoping to have votes. Those people does not have even 1 ward councillor in Khayelitsha. So they have messed everything.
I was in Khayelitsha at Morabesi Park, so I was staying there. Then I moved here on 2021. So yeah, I came here and invading the land because I wasn't have a place to stay. I was homeless because where I was staying before, I was renting. So yeah, so I saw the opportunity to come and invade the land here because yeah, I lost my job because of a pandemic. Most of people who are here, it's the people who lost their jobs, it's the people who become homeless during the pandemic. It started from on that side. There were the people who start to invade the land. The people on that side, near to the Mfuleni. So they invade the land, and we put the shacks because we saw the vacant land. So we put the shacks, and we end up come with in numbers because even the people who was passing here, they saw that hey, this land is the people who are invading the land. The people who come in numbers and occupy this land. So there was a lot of law enforcement here. Fighting with the residents and evicting the land, the shacks here, and without an eviction order. And the people are fighting back because they don't have a place to stay, so they are fighting. But the residents of this community are fighting until we find this land.
No one really knows the statistic, and when they hear it, they think I'm mad. But the reality is Cape Town sits with around 900 informal settlements in Cape Town. We're looking at around 180,000 and it certainly is more by now, but since the last data, 180,000 households in informality, families that live in informality. And this obviously is such a high number post-COVID. We saw a 70% increase in human settlements opportunities. And so I think it's so nuanced and it's so complex because there is no human being that would want to live in some of the situations we find informal settlements in if they didn't have to. I think they are absolutely cowardly and mischievous individuals, generally political, that incite people to invade land, knowing very well services will never be able to be delivered in those areas because it's on a high water table, it's in a wetland, it's on a dune where sand can fall. And so I get very angry when I think about this because at the bottom of that political posturing, at the bottom of that housing campaigning are real people, real children that actually end up going to go live there, coming from somewhere. Because we don't just exist in this world instantaneously.
People lost their jobs. Some of them had their working hours cut. And when the working hours were cut, then that resulted in them being paid less. And also the property prices have also increased. So as it increased, then it meant more and more people are unable to afford to pay rent. Then that resulted to people building these informal settlements so that they can live with their families. It is increasing, and it is also likely to continue, simply because the state and government are continuing to abdicate their duty, which is to make sure that there's equitable access to land. The reason why I'm saying so, it's because even at a legislative level, on Section 25.5, which says there must be equitable access to land, the state does not have that legislation which defines how to equitable access to land will be enforced and what rights people will have on those particular pieces of land. So with those legislative gaps, then it means that a government is abdicating its duty. As it is abdicating its duty and also failing short to invest on the housing program, then it means that people are left with accessing private accommodation that would need them to have money and also to pay rent. And in the absence of that, then it means that people have no option of accessing housing and also accessing land. Then what is the next available option? It's for them to occupy land. It's for them to occupy unused buildings that government anyway should be repurposing and making them available to the people.
I lost my mother now 3 years ago. The same battle that we are fighting, my mother fought since 1989. My mom has been fighting. And my sister's daughters got all the emails. They sent to the council. They sent to so many people. All that letters we still got on email to show them how long my mother has been fighting for her own house. I lived with my mom at number 34 Shelley Street, Salt River. And I moved to number 22 I'm in the house now 36 years that I'm in at the moment. And by growing up in this area, it's for me, it's very personal because I went to school here, I went to creche here. Even though I work out of the area, this is my place where I grew up. I think it was on the 26th of June that we all received letters from the city. Some of the letters says that we are unlawfully in the house. Some of the letters say that they're going to send people in to view our houses, and which I feel it was very unfair, because in our lease it states, if council should sell these houses, we as the tenants get first privilege to buy. So we just feel it was very unfair of the city to do with us what they are doing now. They don't care for us because for one reason, a building has went up here. The first thing I asked, who gave the right away for the building to go up, and they said it was the city. And what I think personally, I don't know, personally I feel, the reason why they want us out here, they've got a buyer for this whole road. They've got a buyer. That is how I personally feel. Because as you see, a building is going up next to us, and we see no parking, no nothing. We saw even the plans of this building, and there's no parking facilities there. So that is what we, as tenants, think, that they want these buildings to be thrown down and do what these people want to be done. It's history, number one, for me. And number two, it's like treasure. They're taking treasure away from me. And yeah, personally, I feel very sad what they are doing. Because, I mean, I was a baby and grew up from baby up until now. I'm still in Shelley Street.
What we cannot run away from is that property prices in Cape Town is becoming exceedingly exorbitant. And I think not without a good reason, it's becoming one of the most investor-friendly places in the world. let alone South Africa. Tourists come here in their droves. We are one of the best rated cities in terms of tourism. And so I get it. And so I think we mustn't look at this from a perspective of a bad thing, but how do we as the city, but also governments generally, mitigate the effects on local residents? So is Cape Town more unequal? No, I think we're doing a lot more to ensure we bring communities together, that we uplift communities, that we empower communities. But naturally, because of the history that this country faces, there is a fundamental divide in class, which is aligned to race because of our history. Coupled with that, what you can't get away from is that Cape Town is the fastest growing metropolitan in the country. We estimate that by 2030, we could exceed 10 million residents in the city if it continues to grow at the pace that it does. And what does that bring? Because all of these people aren't necessarily professionals that are migrating. We are getting people migrating to Cape Town because it's the best place to find a job, it's the best place to pass matric, it's the best place to access healthcare that works. And so that brings informality to our city. That grows the waiting list, that ensures that there's more people that seek human settlements opportunity in our city. Now, unfortunately, that creates and adds to this perception of inequality. But I think what we should be doing is talking about what is the city doing in prioritizing its budget to ensure that we invest in those individuals and those communities so that they can have the best opportunity to live a life of value in our city.
We grew up here, like Sharadia said, we went schooling here. We've got great memories, you know. I mean, I can tell something about myself. I was here at the school. I was in talent contests. I used to, you know, my happy free days was here, you know. And to leave it now, it's going to be very, very sad. It's going to be heartbroken, really. When I read the notice, I'm reading through it. I thought to myself, they wrote it out very, very, very dumb. It's stupid. And what also stood out for me is that in the notice states, you're occupying unlawfully. So how can you tell me I'm occupying a place unlawfully, but you send me statements every month, I pay your rent every month, and you tell me I'm unlawfully occupying the place. So that also stood out for me. Like I said, we've been here forever. So where are we going? That's my question to the city. Where are we going? Do you think about the lives that the people that's living there, their whole life, and you just want to now treat us like dogs? I will say like dogs. Being thrown out like that? No, that's not fair. It's not fair. Where must we go with our children? They don't consider these things. They're not considering us. They're thinking about their pockets. And I mean, inside you're furious, but you have to keep a cool head because, you know, but it's frustrating. It's just, I can't explain. And you want to get angry and you get this and that, but we're just going to take this thing forward and we're going to try our utmost best to win this case. We're just going to continue doing what we have to do, fight for what is our right and what we believe in. We're just going to continue that. And we're going to win. We're going to win. I believe that.
You know, the Shelley Road incident is a contextual one. The majority of these, I think it's 9 properties, comes from a transitional agreement, I think in 1999 when we had the local councils. And that urban then transferred to the Unicity. And as part of our optimization strategy in the city, it was recognized that these are actually surplus assets that the city doesn't require. Currently is not vested with human settlements. So I think it's very easy because people live there to look at it through a housing lens, but in fact, the city has viewed it as a asset owned and a property owned by our property management department. And so in the general run-of-the-mill of processing surplus land, it was sought to consider disposal. And so all that was served on those residents is an intention to look into this. It was not an eviction or an eviction order. It was an intention to dispose, and so the possible need to vacate. I did become aware of it, and I've engaged my counterpart in human settlements. We are fundamentally a city of hope. We are a caring city. We are one that wants to make sure we empower Cape Townians. And so I've undertaken to do a profiling of those residents with the intention that if there is a qualification for those properties in terms of historical significance, that we could look at transferring it to those residents. So I am well aware of the Shelley Road matter, and I am looking into it.
Is an activist organization that is bound to disrupt the patterns of spatial injustice and spatial apartheid in Cape Town, to say that prime land in the city of Cape Town must be released to build housing for people. So that's what we do as an organization, and that's in the context of the very rich and violent history in this country that meant that people had to be desegregated. And in the main majority of poor black people were pushed into the urban peripheries, and the inner city remained quite very white. And those are the patterns that we're wanting to disrupt, to say that it cannot be 30 years into the so-called democratic dispensation that there are these disparities in society that we will continue to see. There must be social integration. People must coexist, must learn to live with one another. Gentrification in its character has led to displacement of people. The state and the city views land as a commodity. It views land as a commodity, as something to be sold to the highest bidder. That's how they view land. They don't view land as for its social value, as something that can accelerate social transformation in this country. So that's the problem, is that they're wanting to sell off public parcels of land to private developers to develop these exclusive apartments that we see that no one can afford. And part of what we've been saying is that they must regulate the private sector. We can't be losing the remaining public parcels of land to private hands when we're in the middle of a housing crisis. And we're saying that the state must build transitional homes for people and not evict people into homelessness.
I think it's rather mischievous for people to hold the view that property shouldn't be for profit, it should only be for humanitarian purposes. I think that we all have different roles and functions and intentions, and I don't think any Cape Townian should be barred from having aspirations to be property developers for profit. However, that should not be the primary focus of a state institution when delivering for the majority and the broad majority.
It was either going to be stay there until the sheriff of the court comes in and puts all our stuff out onto the pavement to get us out there. But we chose to leave with a little bit of dignity out of our own accord. And I'm very grateful for this place, because without this place, we would literally be in a park or on, like in a tent, or God knows where actually, because we don't have options. Since this whole ordeal, I don't have family I can turn to. There's no support system. And so losing that house was a big knock to all of us, because then everybody went their own ways, and now they don't see their cousins anymore. They don't, like their sister was also in the house, now she doesn't live. Everybody just went their separate ways, and that's a loss of its own.
Homelessness is the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot underlying to what added to someone's journey onto the street and also what kept them on the street. Every person is individual and unique, but I think common denominators is a society in trauma. It's the breakdown of society. I think one of the misconceptions is that a person doesn't want, they choose that lifestyle. So then the biggest misconceptions is the person is experiencing homelessness, I offered them a job, they didn't take it, so obviously the conclusion is they want to be there. They choose it, they don't want to move off the street, they somehow it's a better life for them and they choose it, and there's a lot of anger that goes with that. So that's a misconception, because whenever I speak to people, very few people are saying, I choose this lifestyle, there's nothing else that I want. Most people say, I don't want this, it's just, how do I leave this? How do I make those changes? Living on the street and surviving on the street, they're a very vulnerable group of people. And I do believe a lot of people are seen as criminals when they are merely trying to survive, or they're stuck. Their independence has been taken away by being stuck in something like addiction or whatever other unhelpful cycle of coping that they've required to survive. There is a criminal element. But in order to be able to separate those, you need to be able to look at the vulnerable and offer services that's needed so that you can start seeing, okay, what is the criminal element and how can we address that? Otherwise, you're sitting with criminalizing 100 people where maybe 1% was someone that needed to be held accountable for having ill intent.
Basically, about 2 days before Christmas, we had to try and find a place to stay. This was the only place that was available for us, and this whole place was just full of almost, I want to say, trash, because the guy that was using this mainly as storage, he takes everything out of dirt bins, like blankets or weed eaters or random stuff. But this whole place was just full of random things that people had thrown away. There's no toilet. That's the main thing. You can't, since we've been here, we haven't been able to take an actual shower or, it's just in a small bucket. We've tried to insulate as much as we can on minimal to no budget at all, because we don't have income, really. Everything that we get, we have to buy food. And that's not even a fraction of enough to cover 5 people. There's still wind just coming right through here at night. It wakes us up, literally the coldness wakes you up because you're getting numb feelings in your body, that's how cold it gets in here. All of these Wendy houses, the actual houses, it's all going to be thrown down. They're going to be flattened, and it's going to be a complex coming up here, like apartments. And it's getting to the point now where everybody's been handed letters of, if they have to go at the end of July. So that's that side of the wall. So we're going to be next. If they're going in July, where are we going to go to? Even if it is in maybe 2 months after that, still it's it's now, it's occurring. What next? What do we do now? I barely get any sleep because I just sit here and I think to myself, boy, how to get out of this situation where we are all still together as a family, because what options do we have? We've got 3 children. The youngest is 6. What options do we have to take 3 children with us? Nobody's going to give us a place to stay for nothing. There definitely isn't affordable housing, or a bracket like ours, which is almost no income. The only steady income that we are having at the moment is the children's SASSA grant. It's constantly trying to make a plan for food. That is my main priority, is to feed my children. So 8 o'clock in the morning sometimes I start, and sometimes the last soup kitchen or whatever that I go to in the day is maybe at 7 o'clock. So it's a whole day of scattered places where I try to get little bits of something so that we don't have to be hungry tonight. You know, you don't have to go to bed. Your children is asking you, Mommy, what is there to eat? And you just don't have anything. They don't understand when you say, I just don't have. We just don't have. You know, please just go sleep because there's no point in crying. We can't fix the problem like this.
The cost of homelessness study estimated about 14,000 people living on the streets of Cape Town. That has significantly increased since the lockdowns. Various factors leading to that. I think, again, cost of living has increased, the economy is under strain, but also during the time of lockdown, there was significant factors or significant things that happened that after that has really increased the amount of people having to survive on the street. And I think there's a lot to say that in terms of the prevention aspect, and although U-Turn doesn't focus their intervention on prevention, we do collaborate with community partners, we do look at what does the stats say, we do look at what does the data say. So I think there's a large part in prevention when you look at equipping our communities. But for me, the biggest thing is how do you create that pathway out of homelessness? And with ever-increasing cost of living or ever-increasing house prices, access to full accommodation, those things makes it very difficult to, once you've experienced homelessness, to leave it, even if there's a will to. So, I mean, for both accommodation, but also if you think of jobs. We're sitting in our country with more than a 32% unemployment rate, and amongst the population group of 18 to 35, that's estimated to be about 50% unemployment rate. So there's just too little jobs, too little accommodation, too little of all of that. If you don't have a job, how do you vie for accommodation that you're vying against someone else that has a job? So all of those kind of things, I think, adds to not only what leads people to become homeless, but also prevents people from leaving the streets and being able to rebuild their lives once they've experienced homelessness. If you're sitting with a large group of people who's on that vulnerable spectrum, I think not having access to the necessary resources will definitely have the result that some of those people will end up homeless. I think there's a lot that can be said in it's not just access, but it's also the skills development. A lot of low-cost housing developments within and around our cities often start very well. They start healthy, but over time they also become infested by gangsterism. They become places where people deal drugs, do drugs, and where people then become homeless from. So I think there's a lot to say in terms of how do we even in low-cost housing, how do we develop people into being able to manage that and to manage themselves within a space like that, having access to afford or having access to employment. So not just housing, but employment, having access to the other support networks that we all need in order to live healthy, balanced and flourishing lives.
The court actually wanted to send us to a place where it would not be safe. It wouldn't be safe for me, my children, for any of us to be there at all. It's like in such a dodgy area and so far away. I was just like, how can you want to send us? It's like Blikkiesdorp. That is where they wanted to send us. I was like, I don't even know what Blikkiesdorp looks like, but I know bad things happen there. And they wanted to send me with my children and my husband there. No, I would be dead today. That if I took their option, I would be dead.
We're not animals. We have been dumped here like animals to live in a space like this, because how can you live all your life in a place and just be removed? It's like District 6, when they just remove people out of District 6. And they just decided you will go into all the different areas. Look what they did to us. They came to put us to Bush of Evil. Do you know that Blikkiesdorp is part of Bush of Evil? This is where they put us. We've always read in the paper, oh, there's a body in Bush of Evil, but did we ever think we will be thrown here? So I don't even think they know what they actually done, because in this community, I've lost a lot of friends and family. By the way, my husband too, And it's tough. I was born and bred in Gimpy Street, corner of Gimpy Street, Cornwall Street. So we lived in a triple-story house, you know? So those homes were thrown down where we've been evicted and then moved to Blikkiesdorp. So when we got to Blikkiesdorp, it was undeveloped at the moment. So there was a few blocks that wasn't yet up, And also there was no electricity. So now just imagine you're coming out of the city where it's a walk away from the shops, where your safety is, you know, and now you live in a bush. There's no light. Now you have to learn how to cook every day on a fire. You have to go to the bush and you have to get some wood and you have to cook on the fire every day. You have to make your water on the fire. You're living in a place that's a cold storage and you don't even know where the shops are because like it's a far walking distance. The schools, the kids was at the time still in Woodstock, so it was transport every morning to take them down to the taxi rank, to get them to school. It was difficult. It was hard, it was tough because some people were unemployed, not working. So at the same time, the poverty, man. You know, when people really live in poverty, I mean, if you live in Woodstock, I'm going to be very honest with you, you could survive there, man. That was a survival space. There was no way you could go sleep without food. There was no way that there's not a loaf of bread's money. There was no way that could happen. So Woodstock's people actually started to strike for the light to go on. So we were the people that made City put the light on. Then Plato, he came out and he also said that 3 to 6 months you will stay here and then you will be put in a house. I really can't remember the year, but I know it's more than 15 years. So that was a empty promise made from their side, definitely. It was just to get people to move into this area because they didn't have a space. I mean, Woodstock, if you go back to Woodstock now, it's been developed into a London place. There's no heritage of Woodstock really. If you go back, there's no real heritage of how you grew up and what shops and what was there. So in terms of that, I could say they moved us out because that they wanted the development to happen. And it's still going on from the city side. So they didn't have a plan.
There's no such a thing in this province as temporary location area. There's no such a thing, it's just a recreation of informality, of informal settlements and plunging people into life of indignity. People have moved to Blikkiesdorp many years ago and they're still there to this day, right? If anything, a lot of people are being pushed to there and Blikkiesdorp is full to capacity. It's full to capacity, what was called a temporary location area. It's again us saying that the state is incapacitated to alleviate people from poverty, but it is actively participating in plunging people into those conditions of indignity. People should not be pushed into Blikkiesdorp. The state must create conditions where and release parcels of land in the city center where people can live closer to these social amenities that was speaking about.
We've got phase 1, which is more from A block right down to L block, and then we've got phase 2. So the structures was built in such a way, phase 1 was built with wood. Now just imagine for 16 years standing with wood. People's places are collapsing. All these people's roofs need to be taken off completely because the beams inside, it's finished, it's done. So that's why the people is flooding from inside, from the top, when the rain is falling, because their beds are wet, everything is wet. So that's the first thing they need to look at, from my understanding. The second thing is, it's not the second thing because it's a health risk. So it needs to work simultaneously, where they need to look at the dumpings. Have you looked at how people's cars are breaking, all the holes and everything? They need to come and flat that in our community. Well, otherwise make roads, man. Because how long are we still going to stay here? Come make roads. Make it livable for us. Do you understand? They live in their homes. They've got luxury homes. You know, we don't. We live in a cold storage. Because when you wake up, it's a cold storage. Why does other people's kids have to live like that? If the city want to serve us in a dignified way, they need to build homes in a dignified way for our people.
I wasn't in government 15 years ago, and you know, hindsight is 20/20. But the administration 15 years ago was faced with a situation. Absolute mass evictions happening in the city. The court has granted evictions to private individuals. and literally sheriff of the courts coming around, putting people's furniture on the streets, and you're having essentially a humanitarian crisis. And so, for the good or for the bad, the administration at the time decided we cannot just allow this to be the case. We need to provide something for these people. And I think in the span of 2 weeks, 100 million rand was spent and Blikkiesdorp was created. Decent structures with access to shared services. I think where the government failed of the day was to overpromise something that probably wasn't going to be delivered. And that was to commit that in 18 to 24 months, everyone in Blikkiesdorp would have a house. I think that was probably a big mistake in the development of Blikkiesdorp. I've spent quite a lot of time there, a lot of anxiety, a lot of anger, but we have a solution to eradicating Blikkiesdorp in totality. And that's the Dalk Access Symphony Way housing project. And that is really the hallmark of what I face as an MMC and the sector for human settlements face. Because today, people would have been moving in their hundreds from Blikkiesdorp into Dalk Access Symphony Way if the construction mafia did not extort and murder a city official. And so we are currently advertising a really expensive contract to build that housing project because of the security requirements within the space. And so I'm looking forward to going on site this year at Dalk Access Symphony Way, in which 3,500 housing opportunities will be benefited for Blikkiesdorp amongst the other 2 informal settlements. Leading up to that and this difficult road to building, I'm also acutely aware that the living conditions aren't at a standard that I would want it to be. And so I've made very clear interventions to make sure we upgrade the sewer pump station that exists on Blikkiesdorp, the entry roads to make sure there is a comfortable access into the community. But it also calls on communities to look after spaces to not proliferate land invasion and occupation, because it threatens housing opportunities. So I think that Blikkiesdorp was a necessary intervention at a particular time. I just think it's been there for too long, and as part of my personal commitment as the MACO member is to ensure we eradicate it into Dalk Access Symphony Way.
Who wouldn't want to live in a home? A proper home. I think in terms of hope, people would really want to have a home. They came here with that understanding, we're going to live here 3 or 6 months and we're going to get a home. So in terms of that, there's still hope. People are still hoping the project is going to start and we're going to get our homes, you know. So I can't be the one to say, people, be realist. This is not happening. So I would say, come and better the community. Make it livable for our people and feasible. I would want you to understand these are people just like you. They came out of homes and out of communities, and through circumstances they found them where they are. So we are people exactly like you. We are a community like your community. Yes, bad things have happened, but as a community working together, we try to better our situation in our community. So we're not that bad. Let's move forward in terms of how can we build a future. You must remember, we've got children, our future generation, our future leaders. We also have that where we want to set examples for our children growing up in a community like this, which is not fair because they should have never been here. But through circumstances, I would say they are here.
In South Africa, we have this very violent and hateful past and history that needs to be rectified. Because now we are just moving as if nothing happened. People were forcibly removed and it was violent. And even now, the fact that people are not able to access the city, they are not able to access opportunities that comes with staying in the city, it means that these people are pushed further and further and further into poverty. You see, each generation inherits resources and assets from a previous generation. So if you displace one generation, it means that the subsequent generation, the only thing that they will be inheriting is disadvantage. And it means that the only thing that they will be inheriting is poverty.